Hello G1s and YouTubers alike, and welcome to CinemAttack, the show where we don't have a tagline. This week we have our thoughts on the new Kick-Ass 2 trailer, some news about multiple Steve Jobs biopics, and some great recommendations as always. However, the review segment's going to have to be a little different this week, as our dear friend Larry was unable to do a review this week due to a pelvic aneurysm. Sounds painful. And like an awesome drug. So you will be getting a review of Oz the Great and Powerful and the incredible Burt Wonderstone. However, Max will be covering Oz solo, and I alone will be talking about the latter. But hey, you've got me as a host this week, which means I get to make jokes at the beginning and the end of the video in exchange for editing the entire thing.
It's not worth it.
Let's get started. I'm Sean Capdeville.
I'm Side Smash.
And I'm Flapperdoodle.
Glad to see you're recovering, Larry. This is CinemAttack.
Oscar Diggs is a musician. Wait, no. Oscar Diggs is a magician. He's also a swindler, a con artist, and a liar. And he actually knows this. To quote him directly, "I am many things, but a good man is not one of them." He is Harold Hill with a top hat, pretty much. Known to his audience as Oz the Great and Powerful, Oscar soon finds himself propelled to the mystical land of Oz. Wait, what? He then learns of a prophecy that a wizard will come to save the kingdom from an unidentified wicked witch who's supposed to attack at some point in the near future. Oscar knows he's not the man they're looking for, but he goes for it anyway, considering there's gold and a throne up for grabs. Will Oscar be able to become the man the kingdom wants him to... Okay, I'm done. The plot of Oz the Great and Powerful is one of its strongest aspects. As someone who's not really a fan of prequels outside of Yoshi's Island, I found that Oz the Great and Powerful did its job and did it quite well as a prequel. It sets everything up to play out in the original 1939 classic, while also telling a self-contained story that stands on its own 2 feet. It goes at a solid pace and never bores the audience with any needless padding. At the same time, even if there was any sort of padding in Oz the Great and Powerful, I really wouldn't mind it considering how gorgeous this movie is. Seriously, these are some of the best visual effects I've seen in a long time. Everything just pops out with insane colorization. You know, in fact, I'm pretty sure Stuttering Craig himself would enjoy the spectrum of light on display here. The best part though is the fact that the effects never overshadow the performers when they're on screen. When the cameras focus on the character, the background stays strictly subtle. When it's not, and instead focused on the world, it struts its stuff and wows with its animation. But it's not just the effects that grab your eyes. The set and costume design are also top-notch as well, capturing the aesthetic of Oz to a very high degree. The sets are all built to fit with the visual effects and are never outshined or outshine them. All of the elements come together to form this excellent visual aesthetic that really helps the film. On a side note, I loved how the first part of the film looked so classic. Black and white and a 4:3 aspect ratio are the visual cues of the old days, where films with sound were called talkies. At the same time, the film's throwback feels too grounded in modern cinematography conventions to truly capture the essence of early 20th century movies. And while we're on the topic of things I didn't like very much, let's talk about tone. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with Sam Raimi, the director of the Spider-Man and Evil Dead trilogies. Now, his approach to tone is a lot different than the usual Disney range, and for the most part, it's a positive thing in Oz. However, there were times when I saw 2 different tones at play, making the film feel unfocused as a whole. I also need to mention the performances. I mean, talk about hit and miss. I mean, the animated characters do a pretty good job overall, but the human actors are a completely different story. James Franco is satisfactory as the wizard, with an excellent shit-eating grin to match his character. Mila Kunis, on the other hand, is quite wooden. Not only is her delivery stale, the writing itself it's ugh. And the same goes for the other witches. They act all royal and prim and proper, and it just all comes off as very awkward. But the performances don't ruin the film overall. They just could have been a lot better. I enjoyed watching Oz the Great and Powerful. It's not great or powerful, but it's damn good and a movie I recommend to anyone looking for something lighthearted and whimsical in their latest trip to the movies. It's got some problems here and there, but nothing that would keep me from giving it a solid thumbs up. Oz the Great and Powerful gets 4 emerald green stars out of 5.
Who needs magic when you got jump cuts? Every live performer, when I think about it. So, every magician. Let's retry this intro. The incredible Burt Wonderstone follows superstar magicians Burt Wonderstone, played by Steve Carell, and Anton Marbleton, played by Steve Buscemi, and their fallout of popularity as the new act in town, Steve Gray, played by Jim Carrey, starts to take away their audience. Let's hit the big one first. Let's just get it out of the way. Is the incredible Burt Wonderstone funny? That's completely subjective. But personally, I thought it was. There were a few punchlines I saw coming from, miles away, and some jokes that I just didn't get, but the film as a whole consistently made me laugh with dialogue-based and physical humor. Some people have called the humor in the film too dark. I couldn't disagree more. I think the dark humor was actually the best in the film, and it was never unnecessarily dark. Whenever it was really dark, it was, to show something about the characters, or it fit in the scenario at hand. In fact, I actually had a headache from laughing so much after watching The Incredible Burt Wonderstone. So that's a good sign. What really sells a comedy, though, is of course the performances, and this film had no shortage of big-name actors. Steve Carell is great, as always, Burt being right on that line between lovable jerk and just jerk, and it gets farther and farther from that line as the film goes on. Like most of Steve Carell's previous work, the character's ignorance is what makes him so funny. Steve Buscemi is sadly not in this movie as much as I would have liked, but whenever he is, he's just that delightful, down-to-earth guy, you just kind of want to grab lunch with. Same goes for Olivia Wilde, though she does have a little more of a role. She's likable, and that's about it. Alan Arkin playing the bitter, cynical old magician is awesome, of course. I can never really grow tired of this character. It works really well in Argo, and it works just as well here. And finally, we get to Jim Carrey, who completely steals the show. I can see immediately why he accepted this role. Steve Gray is completely insane. He just hurts himself and pretends it's magic, then disses the old magicians because they're doing real magic. I don't know. You can tell Carrey is having a blast with this role, and because of that, the audience has a blast with him. I wouldn't be surprised if the character was written just for him because it's perfect, and he's perfect. Seriously, go watch the movie just for him. The downside of The Incredible Burt Wonderstone is the incredibly conventional plot. But, to be fair, I rarely expect greatness from the plot of a comedy. To the film's credit, while I certainly knew where it was going to end up, kind of the fall from power and redemption storyline, I never really knew how it was going to get there. The next scene was never totally predictable, so at least it has that. I did find the romance between Burt and Jane totally unnecessary, though. It wouldn't have killed this film to just make them friends. I think the characters were more prone to become friends than lovers. But I keep forgetting, the main male lead of a film and the main female lead have to get together in the end, because that's Hollywood law. A very nice touch, however, is the way that the characters talk about magic. And you can tell the writer has a deep respect for magicians and, their shows, their craft. And you can't help but kind of get into that. When I left the theater, I kept thinking to myself, yeah, magic is pretty cool. So yeah, that about does it. Sorry this review is kind of shallow and short, but to be completely honest, there's really not much to this film. It's just a fun little goofy comedy, but I do think it's a good movie, thanks to a few key areas really shining. The Incredible Burt Wonderstone, out of 10, gets a 7.
It's that time once again to gather around your computer screen with your loved ones, if you had any, and learn about what's new in Hollywood. This is the CinemAttack Newsreel. On October 5th, 2011, the technology and business world's born, the passing of visionary CEO Steve Jobs of Apple. His humble beginnings and legendary foresight made him one of the most respected figures of the past few decades, so clearly a film about his life was put into production. Actually, two were put into production. The first is from Moneyball and social network writer Aaron Sorkin, and will consist of literally just 3 scenes, each taking place backstage before one of Steve's famous product reveals. Despite this incredibly unorthodox format, Sorkin's writing should give us great insight on the man who changed the industry mere moments before doing so. Sadly, this picture is still in the early stages, so to hold you over, Ashton Kutcher stars as Steve Jobs in Jobs. Early screenings have received mixed reviews, including one from Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Apple himself, saying, "It's totally wrong. I'm embarrassed. But if the movie is fun and entertaining, all the better." Despite the factual inaccuracies, I had high hopes for the film, so you can imagine my frustration when, last week, distributor Open Road Films removed its April 19th release date and postponed it indefinitely. Some people claim this was done in response to the mixed feedback, others say it was done merely to give the company more time to advertise it. I personally think they're converting to 3D and adding more Channing Tatum. Whatever the reason, a new release date has not been given as of March 21st. But the real news about Steve Jobs' biopics is buzzing all around the internet. Comedy website Funny or Die is making their first ever feature film called I, Steve. What started as a simple fake trailer evolved into an 80-page screenplay, written in only 3 days and shot in 5. It is based on a cursory look of the Steve Jobs Wikipedia page, and has been described as very silly and a biopic poking fun at biopics. The icing on the cake is the fact that Steve Jobs will be played by none other than Mac himself, Justin Long. I personally cannot wait for this parody, and the same goes for Jobs and especially Aaron Sorkin's film. This anticipation is, of course, based solely on my love of comedy and cinema, and not my undying obsession with Apple products. Now that you're all caught up on a subject you didn't care about, I shall leave you with some words of wisdom from Steve himself. From all of us here at the CinemAttack Newsreel, stay hungry, stay foolish.
Greetings, fellow cinephiles, and welcome back to Recommendation Domination. This week it's my turn, and on this segment on the show, we're going to take a look at 5 movie recommendations for you guys. The first 2 are movies that are thematically similar to the ones that we reviewed in this episode. The next 2 are movies that are soon to come out on Blu-ray and DVD, and the last one is for a movie that is coming out soon to theaters. And my selection this week, you're going to want to see day 1. This week, I didn't get any reviews up for you guys, but you can bet I'm going to make up for it right here, right now, with Recommendation Domination. Let's dominate and recommend. Sure, let's do it. This episode's a very special episode, considering we have 2 movies that we reviewed. So, because we have 2 movies we reviewed, I am going to cover both movies that both reviewers covered. So, let's start off with Max's movie, Oz the Great and Powerful. Oz definitely has some beautiful animation, a likable performance from James Franco, and overall, a very likable cast of characters. However, sometimes the movie just becomes too silly, sometimes it becomes too cliche, and overall, the villains aren't very menacing and incredibly overdramatic. If you want a film that actually doesn't have these problems, I'm going to recommend Kung Fu Panda 2. Released in 2011 under DreamWorks Animation, Kung Fu Panda 2 is the sequel to the original Kung Fu Panda, which I enjoy very dearly. In fact, it's one of my favorite animated movies of all time. So it is no surprise I am also a huge fan of the sequel. The movie continues Po's journey to become a Kung Fu master, as he now must battle Lord Shen, who, long ago, was said to be defeated by a warrior of black and white. Get it? 'Cause he's a panda? The movie has stellar animation, well-thought-out action scenes, a ton of likable characters, including Lord Shen himself, and a kick-ass voice cast, including Jack Black, Gary Oldman, Angelina Jolie, you name it, they all nail it. But the main reason I think that Kung Fu Panda 2 is as good as Kung Fu Panda 1 is because it takes Po's journey, which was a simple concept from the first movie, and it overall expands it to make it a much more enjoyable, a much more dramatic, and overall a very well executed part of the plot. Po learns to find his inner self and embrace who he is and what he has become. It's a great lesson for kids to learn, and the movie does this moral perfectly. Kung Fu Panda is definitely a great time for the whole family, so I suggest you see it as soon as you possibly can. So we've handled Oz, let's take a look at Burt Wonderstone. You know, Burt Wonderstone is the perfect definition of an actor's movie because it has a really weird script and comedy that's way too dark and way too cynical for its own good. And the performances in the movie pretty much keep it afloat. I mean, you got Alan Arkin, Jim Carrey, and Steve Carell, Steve Buscemi, and even Olivia Wilde does a pretty good job in the movie. So the performances really do help keep the movie afloat. Now, seeing as the movie Burt Wonderstone is a movie about an egotistical bastard who ends up learning a lesson with great performances, I'm going to recommend another movie that is, well, just that. And that is Groundhog Day. In probably one of the most notable Bill Murray starring roles of all time, Groundhog Day places a television reporter in the same day over and over again until he learns right from wrong and becomes a better person. And this day just so happens to be one of his most hated holidays, Groundhog Day. The movie's a very interesting study into the character that Bill Murray's portraying. And guys, Bill Murray's genius. I mean, seriously, in this movie, he is just so freaking hilarious. Every line he says, the way he uses the subtlety in his ego, yet adds that drop of emotion to make it even funnier. It's all brilliant, and I love him. I love Bill Murray. He's a great actor. I gotta see Ghostbusters again. Now, going back to what I said before about how this movie's actually creative, I think it does well handling the time loop thing. I mean, he tries a bunch of things. He tries to be suicidal. He tries to meet women and then try to re-meet women the next day because he messed up the day before. And he goes through the insanity motions and everything. It's just overall incredibly funny, and it's truly comedic gold. Sure, it's comedic and dark at some points, but the heart and the moral of the story eventually come through, and it's really nice to see that, especially with Bill Murray eventually going through this character change. So, I highly recommend Groundhog Day. It's comedic gold, it's got a good moral, and just like the day that Bill Murray goes through in the film, it's great to watch again and again and again. Now it's time for DVD recommendations, and guys, I have two pretty damn good ones from last year. You know, thinking about it, it seems a little bit inhumane to not recommend The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey that comes out on Blu-ray this week. I mean, who would do such a thing? Now look, I may not be the biggest Lord of the Rings fan, but I think the critics were wrong to so heavily criticize the newest live-action Jackson venture. I didn't mind the first hour at all, as I found it entertaining and incredibly enjoyable. I liked all the CGI used, considering it all was used very effectively, and I think the performances were great. And do I even have to mention the scene with Gollum and Bilbo as they discuss riddles? I mean, that is probably one of my favorite scenes from 2012 alone. And you know what? God damn it, give Andy Serkis an Oscar already. Seriously, what the hell? This guy is a talented man, and he deserves a full-fledged golden naked man. You know, on second thought, that came out a little wrong. And along with The Hobbit, you can also buy Zero Dark 30, which is coming out on Blu-ray and DVD very soon. Now, I honestly didn't fall in love with this movie during my theater experience. I mean, I thought it was very well made, and I loved the ending, as it was very gripping and truly suspenseful. But for some reason, I didn't latch onto it quite as much as I was hoping for. But I think that if you like going into the ways that the CIA works, and how they figured out where Bin Laden was, and how the mission actually ended up going, I think this movie is absolutely perfect for you. And you know, despite me not loving the film, I think the performances are fantastic. I mean, Kyle Chandler and Jessica Chastain do a fantastic job in this film. But the best part is that it truly goes deep into the psyche of someone who is obsessed with completing a mission that she will do anything to get what she wants. And she will have nothing less than absolute perfection. And as much as you think you know everything about this sort of character archetype, I guarantee by watching Zero Dark 30, you're gonna find something new. So those are my DVD recommendations. And also, I guess Life of Pi is also coming out on Blu-ray and DVD, but come on, who really cares about that one? I mean, it only won like 4 Oscars or something. Now let's go back to earlier in recommendation domination. We had Oz, which had beautiful visuals and really intense action, and then we had Burt Wonderstone, which had incredible performances and some pretty good comedy, even though some of the comedy faltered a little bit, but that's not the point. So what if I told you that coming up very soon, there was a movie that combined all of these elements into one gigantic, awesome-looking blockbuster fest? Enter Star Trek Into Darkness. I seriously think this movie looks to have everything. It looks to have great comedy from the crew's witty banter and dialogue. It looks to have awesome action with the chase scenes in the ship and on foot. It looks to have awesome visuals based on the trailers that we've seen. And the acting chops from Chris Pine and Benedict Cumberbatch look absolutely stellar. Or you could say, interstellar. No? Oh, okay, sorry. Captain Kirk and the possible Khan in the movie look to have some very dramatic scenes with some truly intense dialogue via a hopefully wonderful script from Roberto Orci and Alex Kurtzman. Plus, with J.J. Abrams directing this blockbuster, there's a near guarantee it's going to be badass, in some way, shape, or form. And while many people are doubting J.J. Abrams' ability to direct a movie like Star Trek Into Darkness, I think he's going to do a good job. I mean, I've seen Super 8 and Cloverfield, and I like them both. And even if he does fail, I still think the acting, action, dialogue, and visuals are going to keep the movie afloat. Star Trek Into Darkness is coming out on May 17th, so be sure to check it out day one. You know I will. That is it for Recommendation Domination this week. Thanks for watching, and also, sorry I didn't get any reviews up for you guys this time. I was very busy with schoolwork and things, and it honestly sucks I didn't get any reviews for you guys. But, next time, that's gonna change for the better. Well, it's time for me to sign off, but remember, the best films you'll ever see, you may not have seen just yet.
Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. I say as if this is a TV show. Thanks for all the trailer responses and all the great feedback in general. We're only getting started, so be sure to follow us on Twitter at CinemAttackSA for news on the upcoming written portion of the show and how you can personally get involved. Until next time, I'm Sean Capdeville.
I'm Flapperdoodle.
And I'm Side Smash.
We'll see you later. Anyone want to buy some pelvic aneurysm?